Coming up on the Branding Deep Dive podcast.
One of the cool things about a brand is that a brand can intentionally represent the best of a people's aspirations. You know, it's almost like a really effective act of branding is anytime you're in Egypt, and I think this is probably the case in a lot of Arab countries. People that see you walking past a cafe or walking past a restaurant, they will often say, "Tafaddal, tafaddal ma'ana," like have some. Now, they don't intend to actually dine with you. The same thing with the taxi driver who is saying, "Khalli alayna khalis," it's on the house. He doesn't intend to actually give you the ride for free. But in terms of generosity, being an ideal of our people, these little seemingly empty pleasantries and practices keep that ideal alive.
This is Ahmed Cheema, and welcome to the Branding Deep Dive podcast. If you're new here, this is a podcast where we have in-depth discussions about what brands are doing well to drive customer loyalty and how you can take those principles and apply them to your own brand. Today we're talking to Ustadh Ubaydullah Evans. Ustadh Ubaydullah is the resident scholar at the American Learning Institute for Muslims and teaches for numerous programs and organizations both in the Chicago area and nationally. In this episode, we dive deep into what shapes our perceptions, why Ustadh Ubaydullah Evans wears the clothes he wears, what brands represent to a people, and much, much more. Even if you're not into branding, this episode is a must listen. Now, here's Ustadh Ubaydullah Evans. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Thank you so much for accepting the invite. We are honored to have you on the show. For the audience that may not be familiar with who you are, your work, for me, you're a teacher. Some of the best moments in my life have been in your classroom, right? And so for the people that have not experienced that, can you give them a brief introduction of who you are, your background, and kind of what you're doing right now?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Ubaydullah Evans. I am currently the resident scholar for the American Learning Institute for Muslims. In addition to that work, whose focus is mostly national. A lot of the work of Alim is national, but I'm also active locally, teaching at a few local mosques, also with the Inner City Muslim Action Network, and also with the Ta'leef Collective. And besides that, I think Ahmed Cheema is just a cool guy. And I understand that tonight we'll have a conversation about branding and some different things around that.
Yeah. So to start off with branding, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with you is number one, people in your space, people that are seen as religious authorities, teachers, generally don't wear the type of clothing that you wear, right? And I know you have a video out there, and I've seen it, where you kind of explain your whole journey. I want to kick this off with that and really get an understanding of like why you wear the clothes you wear. Like I was thinking about, like, as I was preparing for this, I was thinking about like, why am I wearing the clothes that I'm wearing? These are glasses. They're blue light glasses. And I tell myself I wear them because I have a big screen, but in reality, I think I wear them because it makes me look smart. And then like, I got this pullover on because I've gained a lot of weight this last couple of years and I want to make it seem like I'm athletic, you know what I mean? So just want to get into your perspective on clothing and why we wear the clothes we wear.
Oh man, you're really forcing some interest here. It's because although clothing is a place of great intentionality, for nearly everybody. I mean, we live in a consumer, society, and almost all of us have great choice and freedom when choosing our clothes. One of the most insulting things I've ever heard said about someone's clothes is, wait, you mean you chose that and there were other options? You know what I'm saying? But for us, which is not something that could be taken for granted in the past. In a lot of previous generations, clothing was almost like a fact of life. It was just, these were the clothes of your particular trade or vocation or social standing or like this, and maybe you had some choice in like the details, in maybe the fabrication, in maybe the color, but you didn't have a lot of choice otherwise. I think we live in a society in which things are totally open with regard to clothing. I mean, even like basic standards of dress have really faded away. One person said that our lives is like a long running medley of like business casual, right? There's never anywhere that you can't wear business casual, right? Whether it is a black tie event, whether it is an outing with your children, whether it is a sporting event, right? So formal standards of dress have nearly faded, right? You don't have to dress any particular way out of fear of, kind of the brunt of nonconformity. So I, like everybody else, I choose my clothes very intentionally. And I think this might be something particular to me. I try to choose my clothes rather carefully. When I think about how I dress in particular, it's deep because when you start to explain something, it takes all of the cool out of it. You know what I'm saying? The best things are experienced and not explained. But I think I like classic menswear. I think my dress style is kind of conservative. Classic, sportswear with sometimes an occasional, Eastern flourish here or there with maybe something North African, maybe something West African, maybe something from the Levant or Syria, maybe something from Turkey, maybe something from South Asia. But for the most part, I think I enjoy, what you would call like classic, sportswear, but always with, I think, something of an African American, a Black American cultural twist, and that tends to be about not shying away from color, not shying away from more exotic kinds of fabrications, whether it's cashmere or certain kind of animal skins on the shoes. Yeah, I mean, I think I wear, like classic American sportswear, but in terms of my position as a teacher of the faith, I think I am very intentional in wanting to normalize the traditions and a lot of the, I guess I would call it ambient culture. Being a Black American, a lot of your experience is just coming to terms with all of the different historical phenomena that have shaped who you are, right? You can't really claim a kind of mythic authenticity when you're Black American, right? If you attempt to do that, that sometimes feels a bit contrived and forced. So if I like force myself into like a West African cultural paradigm, right, that was like completely shorn of all Western, European and American influences, that wouldn't feel completely at home to me, right? Likewise, there is a part of me that is striving to kind of reach across the Atlantic for something that speaks to my heritage, my history, and who I am. So I think, part of being Black American is just embracing this crazy crucible of cultural influences that are as far afield as Europe, like England. I mean, of course, the English language, hip hop music is from the English language, and that is, maybe a derivative of blues music and rhythm and blues music, and that has kind of cultural antecedents in Africa. And then, I mean, so it's crazy, right? It's all crazy, but I think that I want to appear someone who embraces that as opposed to someone who's retreating from that. I think, for a lot of Black American Muslims, and I talked about this in the video that you referenced, a lot of kind of your initial exposure to Islam, at least for me, and maybe this isn't the case for everyone, it's like you're in retreat from everything Western, everything American, almost seeing that as like, that's adulterated. That's not pure. That's not real. And whether you gravitate toward the expression and culture of West Africa or the Indian subcontinent or Arabia, it's still something that's usually in retreat from kind of the ambient kind of American cultural surroundings that, you grew up very comfortably within.
I think one thing that what I remember in that video is you mentioned that, when you came to Alim, you were in that mindset where you had a jubba on, and then you saw like Dr. Jackson, you're like, man, you know what I mean? It's just like, so what was it that really sparked that transformation where you started realizing that you need to embrace who you are versus, retreat from everything here?
I think, Dr. Jackson was someone whose religious standing was indisputable. When I met him, it was clear that this was someone that took Islam seriously, took Islamic scholarship seriously, but he seemed very comfortable. He was just, wearing like a basic 2-button polo shirt and, a pair of chinos or something like that. But for me, it was almost oxymoronic. Like, how can you be serious about Islam to such an extent that you've learned Arabic, you've lived abroad, but you're dressed in like a 2-button shirt and chinos? Like, how does that, like it was almost oxymoronic for me. And the more I witnessed him just being comfortable in his own skin, the more I longed for a similar kind of comfort. And that's not to say that I don't embrace the cosmopolitan kind of internationalism that comes with wearing jubbas and jalabas and shalwar kameez. I think it's very cool that somebody born in America has exposure to those cultures via Islam. Like, oh man, I'm drinking Turkish tea and wearing an Indonesian sarong. I think that's really cool. But to do those things in a spirit of kind of cultural experimentation is cool. But to do those things while really retreating from who you are, I think that can be a problem.
And then I'm gonna go all over the place, as I mentioned before. Really just have like a few notes, and we're just trying to get through as much as I can. So one of the things I have written down here is a story of a barber when you were in Egypt. And I wrote this down as like a main point, but I can't remember what the story was. So I feel like there's a really good point here. If you remember what that's about.
It's not hard to cut my hair, but I'm still very particular about the way my hair is cut. And it's usually for me about how hygienic the barber is in his practice, right? Is he disinfecting? And this is pre-COVID, but this is how you prevent, razor bumps and other kinds of, skin conditions and stuff like that. So I'm watching, is he changing the blade? Is he disinfecting the clippers, etc.? And so this guy was good, and I knew that I wanted him to shave my head. So I started trying to speak in an Egyptian dialect so as to, avoid the inevitable price increase if he learned that I was American, right? But after a while, kind of the very heavy, very formal classical Arabic that I'm much more comfortable with, it just started like coming out. So he knew that I wasn't Egyptian. So when he asked me, where are you from? Entermin Fane. I was like, oh, like I knew that my cover had been blown. So I just asked him in completely classical Arabic. I said, Khamin, which means you guess where I'm from. And he said, oh, I know where you're from. And I know where you're from. I said, where? He said, Senegal. I said, no, I'm from somewhere west of Senegal. And he said, there's something west of Senegal? Like, he couldn't believe that there was a world west of Senegal. And when I told him that I was from America, he said, America Chica Bica, which was like a line from like a old Egyptian movie. But then he got really serious and he said, if you're from America, there's something I have to ask you. And I got really scared because like his tone became like very grave. I'm like, what? He's like, Obama. This is when Obama was recently inaugurated as president. He said, Obama, Muslim or wala la? He said, Obama, is he Muslim or not? And I said, Obama is a Christian man, you know, by his own, you know, I mean, this is how he, you know, identifies himself. And he said, ولكن اسمه Hussein. When his name is Hussein, مفيش مسيحي باسم Hussein. There's no such thing as a Christian with the name Hussein. Right? He said, how did he get that name if he's not Muslim? And so I began to tell him that President Obama's father was born into a Muslim family in Kenya. But even his father, after some time at university, initially became a radical socialist and then became an atheist, right? أصبح شيوعيا وبعد ذلك أصبح ملحدا. He became a communist. And then after that, he became an atheist. And he looked at me and he said, atheist? What is an atheist? Like, he had never heard that before. Like, this is just like your proverbial Egyptian man in the street. And he had never heard the term mulhid. And so when I explained to him what that was, he said, wow, like, I can't believe that there are actually people that completely deny any metaphysical reality. Like, I can't believe that. And his concern wasn't like salvation. His concern was social. Like, what do they do when a baby is born? How do they get married? What holidays do they celebrate? Et cetera, et cetera. So when I started explaining to him, many people identify as atheists, especially in Western Europe, in America, increasingly here in the Arab world, he was like, Subhanallah, glory to God. Rabbi ahsan al-khaliqeen. My Lord is the best of creators. And I thought to myself, that's a really strange pivot. Right? And I said, what caused you to say that? He said, I mean, if God can create and sustain and show mercy to people who deny his very existence, he must be a magnificent God. And I thought to myself, wow, here is a man who just encountered something for which he had nothing in his frame of reference. Like, he had no analog for that. But it didn't make him insecure. It didn't even make him feel like he has to find them and change them. It actually was something that confirmed his belief in what he believed in. The fact that somebody could be so radically different, right? It was something that, in a sense, kind of sparked his religious imagination. It sparked his curiosity. Like, wow, like, how great is God that he can create and sustain people that I didn't even know existed up until this point? Wow. And I thought, like, people in America that deem themselves sophisticated don't have that deep an appreciation for difference.
That's
right?
That's powerful.
Spiritual appreciation, like, whoa, that's deep. Wow, mashallah. You know, and I thought to myself, if I could get to that place with a lot of things that are strange to me, like, it doesn't mean that you don't take a moral position on them, but if you could first have just some wonderment, like, there are people who do what? Subhanallah. God creates all sorts of things that I have no, whoa. And then begin thinking about them. I think you would think about them a little bit differently, right? And I mean that across the spectrum. It's like, what kind of relationships? Well, I've never heard, wow, that's different to me, but subhanAllah, that too is something that God decreed. Doesn't mean that I don't have a moral position on it, but still recognize that it only exists because God wants it to exist, right? And its existence, no matter what our moral position on it is, the existence of this or that is a confirmation of just the creativity of God. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, you mentioned like the lens, like, something that he encountered, something that's completely outside of his frame of reference and, the way he views the world. And that's kind of where I wanted to pivot the conversation and move to. Do you I think this is a Dr. Jackson story that he mentioned, but I think he was at like a convention where they were talking about like Mozart and how great of a, his memory was and all this stuff. And then I think he mentioned the story of Imam Bukhari, and like someone remarked like, that's not possible.
It's not possible.
Right. And so just wanted to really just dive deep into like what, like the way we view certain things and the lens we wear when we're looking at things, right? This is clearly like, oh, he can't because he's a Muslim Arab person, right? Mozart can do all this because he's, European male, what I mean? Like, so where do we get that? And like, how do we recognize these biases and things that cloud our vision?
Man, in Islamic law, there's a foundational legal principle that says al-hukmu ala shay juz'un an tasawwuri, that your judgment concerning something is really just an extension of how you conceive of that thing. Right? And I would add to that, you know what I'm saying? And I would add to that saying how you conceive of something is really just an extension of your experience with that thing, right? And you're not always in control. Sometimes the experiences that you have with something are very, very intentional. They're very, very intentional. I remember reading Edward Said's Orientalism. And in one passage, he was talking about the British Imperial Raj, right? When the British ruled India. And he was saying that they would make officers retire from active service at the age of 40, right? Because they wanted their brown subjects to always see white men at their peak. I mean, I want you to almost see us at our very best, at our fittest, at our most capable, because I don't want you to see even just the natural kind of cycle of, human peaks, and then of course the inevitable valleys. Like, I don't want you to see me in a natural way. I don't want you to see me like, at one point I was stalwart and young and sharp, but now a little bit of weight, a little slower, beginning to lose some of my mental acuity. Like, the fact that they were intentional, I don't want our subjects to see us in that way. Is that they were intentionally trying to create a certain image of whiteness, right? And likewise, we have imbibed a lot of images of brownness or Indianness or blackness or Arabness, or, even within whiteness itself. There's a way that we depict people from the rural South. There's a way that we depict people from England. There's a way that we depict people from California. Now, what I think many of us aren't aware of is how deeply these depictions and this image creating enterprise has saturated our minds, right? Even those of us that think ourselves, pretty self-aware, right? So that, when a Black man in a professional meeting is speaking, we find ourselves listening very closely for solecisms. Like, we're listening very closely for grammatical mistakes, right? If he says one subject that doesn't match his verb, that's it. It's affirmative action. No, you see? Whereas a white speaker, particularly like a British speaker, may commit the same exact grammatical mistakes, but we are so convinced of the sophistication and intelligence of white British people. So it doesn't even set off the same bells, right? It'll go right past you, right? In the same way that a person said, if you enter a job interview, even if you are a scientist of the highest caliber and you speak with a Southern accent, people will assume you not quite as intelligent, right? Because there's something we attach to that drawl. Even if you're saying all of the same words and the speech is just as sound grammatically in terms of standard English, there's something we attach to that drawl. There's an image that we don't connect with intelligence, right? So the human mind is always forming those connections, right? What I think self-conscious people or self-aware people have to do is just to be aware of it. But I think we are all subject brands, right? Which is, I realize is the main focus of our conversation. Branding is happening whether we know it or not. And we're all affected by it. And it's okay. I mean, if you enjoy a little romance, it's okay even to play into certain narratives sometimes. But I think it's important to know that you're leaning in that way, right? It's important to know that you're leaning in that way, and that the subsequent judgments that you form on the basis of those opinions could be completely inaccurate or even baseless, right? So yeah, I think for the last 400 or 500 years, to your direct point, European and by extension American genius is something we just, we believe in almost wholeheartedly. Even to the point that, when I was in Egypt, I noticed a lot of establishments, from nurseries to daycares to schools to grocery stores, using the term modern. This is a modern daycare. This is a modern preschool. This is a modern grocery store. And, I think it was clear that they had some self-doubt about the modernness of their civilization. I think that much was clear, right? What I found interesting, like an interesting parallel, Americans very rarely use the term modern to describe anything in American society. It's almost taken for granted that if this or that thing is in vogue in America, of course it's modern. Even though when compared to like Japan, America is a technological dinosaur, right? Not nearly as advanced technologically as some other places in the world, right? But Americans are convinced of their modernness. They're convinced that, oh yeah, sure, right? Even the way that Americans deploy terms like freedom, oppression, justice, etc., progress. I don't consider myself a philosophical progressive or even a political progressive, but if we're judging progress by the standards that people who identify with those labels do, the Nordic countries are much more progressive than the United States, right? Much more. But Americans are convinced of, their commitment to freedom, their commitment to justice. So a lot of this is just really effective branding. It's just really effective branding. And when you see people who believe so wholeheartedly, they're so credulous, like, man, it just makes you think, what are the things that I believe in wholeheartedly in that way? Maybe I try to watch myself with regard to like, something as obvious as like the Mozart story. But to your point, I mean, if I want to be completely honest here, straight up real, one place that I do lean into some of that is like German engineering. Are German cars really better than Japanese cars? Probably not. No, really, probably not. But for me, Porsche, oh man, they build these things, Germans, man, Germans in engineering, it's, So, I'm aware that this is a perception that has been created, has been nurtured, and, I choose to attach some value to it. But at least I can see when I'm doing that.
when we talk about, actually crafting and taking control of your brand and creating your own perception for your people, I think there's a lot of lessons we can take from the nation. I have some notes here. I can read up some of the bullet points, or if you want to just go off the dome on that.
Bismillah, whatever you prefer, man.
So
I mean, it's actually one of my favorite topics, actually.
Yeah, so a couple of things, and this is for the audience that's listening, this is from Ustadh Ubaydullah's class on the history of Islam in America at Alim. Just a couple notes that I took, and I'm not the best note taker, so please forgive me. But so nation took elements of elite white culture and made it black. Another note I had here is, I think you mentioned a story of someone that you asked, and you said, what made you join the nation? And the response was, I was walking past a temple and I heard a new car door slam. And then there's the concept of like self-economics. And then this is the real thing that I think that is the meat here, is like they succeeded at creating an identity perceived as being Islamic, Black, and it empowered them to change their lives, right? And so,
man, I mean, I think you're a great note taker. I think one of the cool things about a brand is that a brand can intentionally represent the best of a people's aspirations. It's almost like a really effective act of branding is anytime you're in Egypt, and I think this is probably the case in a lot of Arab countries. People that see you walking past a cafe or walking past a restaurant, they will often say "Tafaddal, tafaddal ma'ana," like have some. Now they don't intend to actually dine with you. The same thing with the taxi driver who is saying "Khalli alayna khalis," it's on the house. He doesn't intend to actually give you the ride for free. But in terms of generosity, being an ideal of our people, these little seemingly empty pleasantries and practices keep that ideal alive, right? And I think that has great utility, that even though I don't intend for you to actually eat with me, right? But saying have some is just a way of reminding each other that generosity is our brand, right? As Muslims or Egyptians or Arabs, this is just our brand. This is what we do, right? Similarly, I think the Nation of Islam, what's really special about the Nation of Islam among other groups that participated in the Black Freedom Movement is that for Black people in America, authenticity and I would call it having an enabling culture have always ran on different axes, right? You can do something that's very, that makes you feel great authenticity, right? There's different kinds of religious expression, cultural expression, political expression, and you can definitely feel in those things a deeper, stronger, more prominent connection with your Blackness or with your Africanity or with your heritage or with your culture. Those things, those expressions of culture have always struggled to also be enabling. Meaning like, okay, that's good, but we really do need better jobs. We really do need community development. We really do need professionalism. We really do need scholastic excellence. Like we actually really need those things. And so people that have, focused on the other axis, like let's say Black conservatives, right? Focused on education, focused on professionalism, focused on, amassing, political power, usually not grassroots political power, but engagement with the two-party system in America. That has not always resulted in a great feeling of authenticity for Black people. So being able to kind of merge those two axes, one of authenticity and one of producing a very enabling culture, an upwardly mobile culture, a culture that can see itself as refined, as dignified, and actually make some substantive dents in, a lot of the social and cultural maladies that have plagued Black America traditionally, very hard to do those simultaneously. And I think that the Nation of Islam created a brand that effectively fused those two areas of focus. And I don't know any group that has done so as effectively.
Even today?
Even today, usually the groups that are regarded as very authentic, their footprint, their impact in terms of substantive change is minimal, right? But they are regarded as very authentic. And likewise, groups that focus on like substantive change, right? Which usually involves money, involves education. They're not always regarded as authentic, right? They're seen as sellouts. They're seen as, folks that, do the bidding of white communities or tokens, right? This person is positioned there as a token, but, the racism that we really deal with is, still alive and very present. So joining authenticity and effectiveness is the challenge in Black America.
Is it possible for another movement to combine both these spectrums and really create a movement like that again?
Of course, I'm a Muslim. So I'm hoping that some kind of commitment to the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad والسلام, can be a catalyst for that kind of cultural movement. Because one of the, whenever I'm thinking about this, one of the words that comes up quite frequently is respectability, right? A lot of people denounce respectability politics, and I understand why. It's the idea that one has to engage in some kind of extraordinary shows of respectability to thwart the would-be negative consequences of racism. That is quite a silly notion. But to have something independent that you appeal to, your belief, or a commitment to prophetic conduct, through which you aim not to be respectable, but to be righteous. I think that's a very, very important contribution that Sunni Muslims have to make to kind of, some of the intramural conversations about race in the Black community.
Is there anything else you want to touch on, Alim, or share with the audience on anything like how to find you or anything like that? You're not on like social media or anything, are you?
I'm not on social. I'm not ready for social yet, man.
Yeah.
I'm not ready. I got to go back and prepare. But I want to thank my brother Ahmed Cheema for giving me a space and allowing me to come on. And this topic, I really think that we've only scratched the surface. We've only scratched the surface because so much of branding, and this is what you wanted to converse about, involves how we see ourselves and how we see others. To recognize that both of those, how we see ourselves and how we see others, are sometimes the product of great intentionality, that you have people feverishly working to shape, to mold our self-perception and our perception of others, to certain, very specific contours, should just make us, careful, about the images that we accept. And it doesn't mean, again, it's inevitable. It doesn't mean that, I think, when someone says such and such comes from a good family, that is a kind of branding, right? It's a shorthand, meaning I don't know them as an individual. I've never had an experience with them, but they come from a good family, or such and such graduated from this or that school. I can't really confirm on the basis of experience that she's intelligent or that he's intelligent, but I mean, she went to the University of Chicago. That's branding, right? Or he went to Azhar. I guess he would know something about Islam. Maybe I don't know anything about Islam. That's branding. But to recognize the difference between the brand, which again, I think this topic is deep, actually. And I actually don't have a problem with brand. I think branding is inevitable, but recognizing that brand and merit are not the same thing. Even quick example, even like street cred, when a certain area gains a reputation for something, like these guys are tough, or this or that thing. When someone says they're from that place, you just associate them with that brand. Oh man, they're from this place. Oh, they're from that place. Doesn't mean that they actually live up to whatever the brand is. And so I guess to put a cap on this, I heard Dr. Cornel West say about this topic, but speaking about colleges and universities in particular, the question is not whether or not you went through Harvard, but does the best of Harvard go through you? That's the question. See, the question is not, did I go through Azhar? That's not the question. Does Azhar go through me? That is the question. You see? And that's that. I think about that statement whenever I think about branding.
So initially I was planning on recording a separate segment talking about Alim, how you can sign up, where all the details are. But after we recorded, me and Ustadh Ubaydullah actually talked a little bit about Alim. So I'm going to share that with you before we get into the key takeaways from this episode. Anything else you want to touch on before we wrap?
Oh, just that the Alim, just want to invite people to the Alim program, because if I don't do that, Shireen Khan will kill me.
I'll make sure I put that in there. Don't worry. I'll do a full. I'll put the links and everything.
This year, the program is July 16th to August 7th, and we're back at Benedictine in Lisle, which is about 35 minutes outside of Chicago. It's a transformative, life-changing program. I recommend that everyone who can attend. They won't regret it. It's very special.
It's great. Like I went there, and I think it was 2016, and alhamdulillah, like I still have.
Your time with us seems so much more recent than that.
I know. And I honestly, I still have like my entire notes, and like every once in a while I'll just go through, and it's just like some of the words I don't even I have to look up the dictionary, because like when I was there, you guys are all using these big words. Like I don't use it on like my day to day.
That's not a merit. That's a demerit. The goal of communication is to impact the speaker, not just as Dr. Omar Farouk Abdullah used to tell me, we don't speak just to fill the air with sound waves. We speak to affect people. So if I was using words that you didn't know, then I gotta go back and work on my speech.
No, it wasn't not like that. I was saying like everyone's vocabulary level, I think, went up a notch, because you're around so many like academic people that are, and then like you start to lose some of those words because you don't use them as much. But like when you're in that environment, you pick up on it and it makes sense and everything.
I'm like, every time I hang out with Dr. Sherman Jackson, man, I pick up at least 10, 15 words. Yeah.
If you enjoyed this discussion with Ustadh Ubaydullah Evans, I am sure you will love the Alim Summer Program. Registration is now open. Check out the links in the description for more information and to sign up today. Now here are my key takeaways. Number 1, as Ustadh Ubaydullah mentioned, your judgment concerning something is really just an extension of how you conceive of that thing, and how you conceive of something is really just an extension of your experience with that thing. In the branding space, there's a lot of debate about what the actual definition of branding and brand is, but a lot of the definitions sound pretty similar to this. It's about shaping a person's perception about a company or a person by being intentional about the experiences that they have with the brand. And number 2, branding is happening whether you like it or not. The perceptions we have were carefully constructed by someone else. It's It's important to understand and be aware of that. And that is all for this episode. If you enjoyed this discussion, please consider leaving a review and sharing with a friend. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.